achieved.
If I could change one thing in the UFC, it would be they do something similar to what Bellator does and implement periodic tournaments or Grand Prix like Strikeforce attempted to do as their organization wound down. I think that would be some awesome fun. I have an idea already, and I'll talk about that in a moment. Welcome back to Kamikaze Overdrive MMA Predictions. As always, I am your host, Scott Johnson, and on this actually double episode of the show, we're breaking down not one but two upcoming events. First, on July 12th, we have the Ultimate Fighter 21 finale. I'll be giving you three predictions for that card. The final episode of the show has not aired yet, and not even UFC 189 is not taking place. So I'm trying to get ahead of myself here, but I won't be giving you my prediction for the finals. We don't know who's in the finals yet. If I do give that prediction, it'll be in the preliminary section that goes with this card. Also, then on the Wednesday night, July 15th, we have Ultimate Fight UFC Fight Night 71, Mir versus Duffee, and I'll be giving you my 6 main card predictions for that show. Very much looking forward to that. All of the preliminary breakdowns will be available at kamikazeoverdrive.net. Again, I'm going to do my best. There'll be abbreviated predictions, so make sure you check all that out. The bet packs will be available. Again, check that in. I'll be providing discounts. I'll do my best to kick out as much information as I possibly can. I probably won't combine bet packs as far as giving you a fight from here and a fight from there, but certainly I will try and make it a profitable and very busy July for us. Now, as far as the tournaments are concerned, before I get into all my predictions, I think the UFC should offer periodic tournaments for guys that are on the fringe of the top 15 and maybe on the outside. For example, if you were to take 8 guys from the welterweight division right now, listen to this tournament. I would definitely like to check it out. Gunnar Nelson and Brandon Thatcher will actually fight in just under a week's time. Tim Means, Alan Jouban, Yoon Hoon Lim, Jordan Meehan, Eric Silva, and Stephen Thompson. That'd be a fantastic 8-man tournament. You know, you could have one card, a fight night card, where the quarterfinals take place, and then a month later or a month and a half later you get the semifinals, and a month and a half later you get the finals. Have a couple bouts that serve as injury replacement bouts. And winner of that matchup potentially could find themselves close to a top 10 opportunity, and it certainly gives fighters an opportunity to really make something out of themselves instead of having to wait and hope they get the right matchup and the right calls. You win those 3 fights, you're right on the cusp. Just an idea I had. Please, if you have any ideas, post them that you think the UFC could change. You'd like to see differences taking place. Nonetheless, we got a very busy set of fight predictions take place, so let's kick it off with the Ultimate Fighter 21 finale predictions. Now, as far as the Ultimate Fighter 21 finale, the bout order actually isn't set. I'm anticipating a 4-fight main card with the 3 fights I'm going to give you, plus the finals of the tournament on the main card, everything else being in the prelims. Obviously, there's something on the main card that I don't include here. I'll give it to you in the preliminary section, preliminary breakdowns, which will be abbreviated, obviously. And as far as doing fights related to the cast members, if there are any other fights added to the show, I'll do my best. But I'm going to focus on the the fights from roster members from the UFC as of right now. We're going to kick things off in the UFC strawweight division as the debuting Michelle, the karate hottie Waterson, currently carrying a record of 12-4. Takes on Angela, Your Majesty Magana, with current record of 11 wins and 7 losses. Now, Waterson is making her UFC debut. She's actually moving up from atomweight, which is 105 pounds, where she competed under the Invicta banner, and she was the Invicta champion in that division. She beat Jessica Penne to claim the title, defended it once before dropping in her last bout and making the decision to jump up to the UFC. For Magana, she was a competitor and one of the 16 women that contested the first the Ultimate Fighter 1 contested for the title in the tournament. She was ranked 12th. She lost in the first round to Aisling Daly by TKO. Got off to a strong start in that fight, but ultimately faded and lost in the 3rd round. Now, overall, Magana, she's trying to make herself very relevant through social media. Unfortunately for her, she's lost 3 in a row overall. She's 0-1 in the UFC, not including the Ultimate Fighter matchup. She better get a win here, and it could be a big one here if she gets it, or else she's going to be gone. Physically, Waterson 2 inches taller, and she'll be 3 years younger. Now, the impact of her not cutting the extra 10 pounds and the speed advantage should be significant as a result, I would think, and not draining herself. Waterson, she works with Greg Jackson, black belt in karate, 3 wins by knockout, 7 wins by submission, 5 of those 7 wins coming by armbar. She submitted Jessica Penne, so it shows you how good she is on the mat, and she's 2-1 in decision. She has been submitted as well twice, so it's certainly not invulnerable on the ground. For Magana, she has 2 wins by knockout, 6 wins by submission. She's 3-3 going the distance, and the big number that stands out for me with her is she has been tapped out 4 times overall. She has faced some decent upper-level competition throughout her career. She fought, obviously, Tisha Torres in her debut, fought and lost to Jessica Ai, also lost to Jessica Penne. She did beat Barb Honchak, and she has a 1-2 record against the number 1 ranked strawweight on the planet in Jessica Aguilera, most recently winning the last time they fought, but way back in 2009. Overall, Waterson, she can work from range, she throws a nice variety of kicking techniques, and she's exceptionally devastating from the clinch. High pace, high barrage. output, and that's what cost Magana against Torres. She simply couldn't keep up, was outmatched, outpaced, and just got worn out in that matchup. I think Waterson hurts her on the feet, potentially in the clinch, does some damage, takes her to the ground, locks up a submission, and my prediction is Michelle Waterson to defeat Angela Magana by submission, most likely armbar. In the TUF 21 co-main event, Jorge Gamebred Masvidal 28-9-0 battles Cezar Moontasri Ferreira 9 wins and 4 losses. Now this is an exceptionally odd fight, and I'm actually having a little bit of difficulty physically looking at these two guys in my head fighting in the cage, as Masvidal is moving up from lightweight to fight at welterweight, and Ferreira is moving down from middleweight to fight at welterweight. So these two guys from two vastly different divisions coming together here. Physically, Ferreira only 2 inches taller though. He will have a 4-inch reach advantage, and he's 1 year younger than Masvidal. And when you look at Ferreira, he was a very big middleweight. It's kind of surprising when I heard that he was cutting down. How will the cut impact him? It could be difficult. If the cut is hard, it will take its toll. He doesn't have a lot of experience going in longer fights. Of his 12 career bouts, 7 have ended inside the first round, so if the cut is hard, that's going to show up even more there. And his chin is a major issue. It tends to deteriorate as you cut down and drain yourself more. He's already been knocked out 3 times. That could become a bigger issue in this fight. For Masvidal, he's moving up to welterweight. He has fought there before. Last time in 2010, he fought Paul Daly. I believe it was a catchweight bout of 171 pounds, and he lost a decision there, but he certainly held his own. Now, moving up a division for Masvidal should give him a speed advantage. He's talked about in the media how he was cutting a lot of weight. It was becoming very difficult when he's fighting back in Strikeforce. It was draining him incredibly. And, he was planning to move up to welterweight after he fought, I think it was Wilcox, after his title fight loss to Melendez. But when the UFC came knocking, he recognized that staying at lightweight gave him more opportunities to fight at a higher level than moving up to welterweight and kind of starting over. So he stuck there, but now he's moving up. Big experience advantage for Jorge. 37 total fights is just 12 for his opponent. For Ferreira, he's known for his submission game. He is a BJJ black belt, although he only has 2 wins by submission. He also throws a lot of capoeira strikes, style kicks in a striking arsenal. But again, as I said, his chin is a major issue. His defense is pretty weak. He gets cracked a lot. 1.92 strikes landed per minute versus 1.82 strikes absorbed, so not exactly a good exchange rate there. He seems more focused on his striking despite his great grappling capabilities. And as I said, he's 3-3 in fights ended by knockout, so not a great, big-time impressive numbers for a guy who likes to strike. For Masvidal, though, 4.05 strikes landed per minute, so he gets pretty good output. 2.80 strikes absorbed per minute, so he limits his opponents decently. Not elite level, but he's still very solid. Excellent boxing, very technical. The big issue with Masvidal is he sometimes fails to pull the trigger, and he goes stagnant at times and doesn't, basically punch his opponent in the face, which cost him against Al Iaquinta. Big question is, with him not cutting that extra 15 pounds, will he be less drained? Will he be able to let things, let it go and be more aggressive, not have to worry about potentially gassing out? He does have power, 10 wins by knockout. He could crack Ferreira and hurt him. I would expect Ferreira to try and use his takedown, smother Masvidal on the mat. He has had success doing that before in previous fights, but Masvidal has excellent takedown defense. But again, we're seeing a very big middleweight taking on a guy coming up from lightweight, so very interesting there. Ferreira will struggle with the speed and footwork of Masvidal, I think, and I think the less drained scenario for Masvidal certainly helps him there. Masvidal needs to remain active, though. I think the bigger cut versus a guy who's not cutting anymore is going to show up huge. Again, if Masvidal could clip him with a big shot, I think he outpoints him here, pulls away as Ferreira slows down, and my prediction is Jorge Masvidal to defeat Cezar Ferreira by decision. In the TUF 21 main event of the evening, we are still in the UFC's welterweight division. It's the number 9th ranked Jake the Juggernaut Ellenberger, 39-0, battles Stephen Wonderboy Thompson with a current record of 10 wins and 1 loss. Now, Ellenberger's coming off a win over Josh Koscheck, which halted a pretty difficult 3-fight losing streak. He had fought 3 guys ranked higher than him, or at least higher level opponents, and really struggled in all 3 of those matchups and did not look good. Jake, he's been very close to being at the top of the division for a long time. He had won 8 of 9 before that little skid, and certainly was on the cusp of a shot at the title, and this is definitely a must-win fight for him. For Thompson, he debuted with a lot of hype, had a big knockout in his first fight, then lost an absolute war with Matt Brown, the first loss of his career. He has won 4 since that matchup. This is a big, Brown was a big step up in competition. Ellenberger is as well. When he initially fought Brown, Brown wasn't where he is now. He was just starting the run that got him to the top of the division. So we didn't realize how significant that fight was. And of the 7 guys that Brown beat on that significant winning streak, Thompson was the only guy he did not knock out, which is it's a pretty significant feather in his cap. Ellenberger overall 2 years younger. Thompson will be 3 inches taller and will have a 4-inch reach advantage. Now for Wonder Boy, he has 5 wins by knockout, 3 in the UFC, including knocking out Robert Whittaker and Chris Clements. He's 4-1 when going the distance, and he has a submission win on his record as well. He's an accomplished karate and kickbox competitor, 5th degree black belt in karate, black belt in kickboxing, and a BJJ purple belt, so a very accredited combat fighter. Now, Ellenberger, 18 wins by knockout overall, so he has big power in his hands. He has more knockouts than Thompson actually has professional MMA fights. He's also 6-2 in fights ending by submission. He's 6-5 in decisions, which tells me a little bit that he's maybe not great at separating himself from his opponent when he can't actually stop them. He's a BJJ purple belt and an NCAA Division II wrestler. Now, where we have seen Jake struggle in past fights is with technically superior strikers. He completely froze up against Rory McDonald, couldn't pull the trigger. He was beat down by Robbie Lawler, and really looked out of it in that matchup. Not even a competitor. And for Thompson, he offers a dynamic, technically sound striking game. That karate stance is a difficult front for fighters to attack. He changes stances quite a bit and throws a nice variety of kicks. He has nice combinations. He can counter-strike as well. He manages distance exceptionally well, and does a pretty good job of limiting his opponent's the damage they inflict upon him. 4.7 strikes landed per minute, which is a pretty good clip to kick out at. He does hang his hands a little bit. I think it's a lot to do with his confidence, and he will take a shot to land a shot, which again, I don't like that technique, but so far he's got away with it for the most part. Thompson's grappling is improving. He defended takedowns against Patrick Cote. Still, it makes him work and could cost him to drain his cardio, and I think Jake could turn to his wrestling and use that along with a brawling style to maybe take Thompson out of his comfort zone and really have some success there. But Jake has shown more aggression of late, but he tends to stand at range at times, and if he can't get on the inside of Thompson's kicks and punches, that's going to be a massive issue like we saw against Rory McDonald. I think he's going to get cracked and teed off on. He'll get countered as he looks to come in. Thompson has never gone 5 rounds before, which is a little bit concerning, but I think he lands something significant as Ellenberger looks to try and close the distance, and my prediction is Stephen Wonderboy Thompson to defeat Jake Ellenberger by TKO. We now move on to the main card of the UFC Fight Night 71. 6 fights in total, and we're kicking things off in the UFC's welterweight division as Alan Brahma Joban, 11-3-0, takes on Canada's Matt Dwyer with a current record of 8 wins and 2 losses. Now taking a look at these two guys, Joban is an older guy for making his first UFC run. He needs to make his mark now, and so far he has been doing it. Physically, Dwyer exceptionally tall for the division. 6'4", he'll be 4 inches taller than Joban, and he'll have a 3-inch reach advantage, along with being 8 years younger. Now, both guys have big knockout power. Of Joban's 11 victories, 8 have come by knockout, including Richard Walsh, who we just saw also stopping Seth Baczynski in his UFC debut. He took a former Strikeforce and Bellator competitor Chris Spang in a pre-UFC bout. For Dwyer, of his 10 victories, 8 wins have come by knockout, taking out Willie Macario in his last matchup. He also holds pre-UFC knockouts over DeMarcus Johnson and Shawnee Carter. For Dwyer, 6 first-round finishes. Joban, same thing, 6 first-round finishes. So there's a very good chance this fight is not going the distance. Both guys have also lost by knockout before. Joban got taken out by Anthony Angiakwani's brother by a vicious body kick. For Dwyer, he was stopped very early in his career, and then in his UFC debut, he was KO'd in brutal fashion by a head kick and follow-up punches from the hard-throwing Russian Albert Tumenov. Now, both guys have areas of vulnerability, but I think only one has the ability to capitalize on the other's downfall. Joban has had issues with being out-grappled by opponents and spending too much time on his back. I don't think that'll be the case here against Dwyer, who's going to look to keep this fight standing. Dwyer overall lacks a real technical striking game, and he doesn't use his reach overly well as he invites his opponents in to get in that range where they can hurt him. And he gets hit a lot, and that's something that's certainly concerning. He got destroyed by Tumenov. DeMarcus Johnson hurt him a couple of times in that match before eventually succumbing to kind of gassing out and getting knocked out. And it seems that Dwyer's a little bit vulnerable when strikes come from the right side. So that's something if Joban can fire a solid left, that could really do it, put him down for good. Joban was rocked by Seth Baczynski, so his chin, it could be cracked by Dwyer, who does hit very hard. But I think he'll find a home for those power strikes that he's had so much success with. And my prediction is Alan Joban to defeat Matt Dwyer by knockout. We drop down to lightweight for a matchup that is, I think it's a sleeper on this card. It could be very exciting as Kevin, the Motown Phenom Lee, with a record of 10 wins and 1 loss, takes on James Moonwalker Moontasri with a current record of 8 wins and 2 losses. Now, Moontasri is a BJJ purple belt. He's a 4th dan black belt in Taekwondo. He has 3 wins by knockout, 3 submissions, submissions. He's 2-2 in fights that go the distance. So far in the UFC, he's looked pretty good. He's gone 1-1. Short notice replacement against Joe Ellenberger looked good early. Hurt him a couple of times. Ultimately faded probably because of the short notice, and he expended himself trying to put that fight away. He dominated Cody Pfister in his follow-up performance and looked very strong. For Lee, he's an NCAA Division II wrestler, 4 wins by submission, 6-1 when fights go the distance, and surprisingly for a guy who strikes as well as he does, he has no wins by knockout. So far, he's 3-1 in the UFC. He has some pretty solid wins over Michelle Praceres, John Tuck, and Jesse Ronson, and he lost an incredibly competitive back-and-forth battle with Ally Aquinta. For Moontasri, he's got a 1-inch height advantage, but Lee, who's got a very long reach for the division, will have 6 inches of reach on him. He's also 4 years younger. With Moontasri now, he has shown some excellent counter wrestling overall, stopping 83% of his opponent's attempts to take him down. They threw 18 takedown attempts at him. He shut down 15 of them. Lee, though, 3.25 takedowns at a 38% completion rate, so a little less than half. He has landed 12 takedowns in his last 3 matchups, landing 4 in each. Shows he does know how to, he's a fairly competent wrestler and does know how to meld that into his MMA game. When he does look for takedowns, he's pretty dogged on his attempts. That's probably why his completion rate is so low, because he shoots once, he doesn't hit it, he shoots again, he keeps shooting until he eventually gets you to the mat. The end game is he does put his opponents on the ground. Look for him to work along the cage for takedowns, but he's not afraid to shoot in the middle of the cage and try and take that ability to wall walk out of the equation. One thing I like the way he attacks, he does carry a heavy pace and he will wear guys down looking to put them on the mat. He has good hand speed overall, solid striking repertoire, stays in the pocket, and he can work in close and unload with pretty hard-handed, heavy-handed barrages. When he fought Jesse Ronson, he was taking some shots early in that fight, which were a little bit concerning, but he did a nice job of blending his ground game and his striking together and kind of taking that fight back over. Now, Moontasri comes from that Taekwondo background. He's a good kicking arsenal, a lot of dexterity in his legs, some pretty good pop in his strikes overall. He has a nice stepping or jumping knee, whatever he likes to do with it, and he had a counter uppercut against Joe Ellenberger, which put him down and can be very effective against a guy who maybe ducks in when they duck in and look for a takedown attempt. When he fought Ellenberger, he dropped him with that counter uppercut, and against Pfister, he hurt him on multiple occasions. So he's not the type of guy you want to be exchanging big shots with. Now, one thing I don't like about Moontasri is it's fun to watch, but his jumping and spinning attacks do open him up for getting taken down, and that's something. He does have good takedown defense, but it gives opponents opportunities to put him on the mat, and we saw Ellenberger, who was exhausted, but still was able to capitalize on that, and I think Lee will have some success there as well. Cardio issues, again, were an issue against Ellenberger. There were some factors that were potentially resulting in that, but I could see Lee kind of outpacing him and outworking him here and grinding him down. We have a technically sound striker against a very flashy striker, and I usually side with a technically sound guy. I think Lee survives an early storm, outworks him on the feet, lands multiple takedowns with some big top control time, and my prediction is Kevin Lee to defeat James Moontasri by decision. Fight number 3 on the main card takes place in the women's bantamweight division. It's the number 10th ranked women's bantamweight fighter on the planet, Holly the Preacher's daughter, Holm, undefeated at 8-0, battles the number 11th ranked fighter in the division, Marion Reneau, with a current record of 6 wins and 1 loss. Now, this is a very big fight for Holly Holm. Many touted her as the next title challenger for Ronda Rousey. I think the debut took a little bit of that shine off and makes people realize she's not nearly at the place, as far as an MMA fighter is concerned, to challenge someone of Ronda Rousey's caliber. And could certainly get there in the future, and I'd like to see her fight all of 2015 and potentially into 2016 before eventually getting that opportunity. For Reneau, for the most part, she's kind of overachieved in her UFC career. 2 upsets in 2 UFC fights. And if she beats Holly Holm, it throws her right into the mix. She obviously will crack the top 10, and her name will finally get out there. Now, we have an interesting juxtaposition in fight stories. Holm is a world championship boxer, very successful in combat sports prior to entering the MMA game. For Reneau, she's a phys ed teacher. She tried out for the Ultimate Fighter one of the seasons. She was told she was too old to keep pushing and to try and go out there and get a few more wins, and maybe they consider her for coming to the UFC. Obviously, that's the case here, and she's making the most of it. Physically, Holm is 2 inches taller, she'll have a 1-inch reach advantage, and she is 4 years younger than Reneau. Now, for Holly, she comes in with 6 wins by knockout and 2 by decision, one of them coming in her UFC debut. As a boxer, though, she had 33 wins overall, only 9 wins by knockout, and 23 of them coming by decision. So it tells you maybe she lacks in overall power. She makes up for in technical proficiency, but again, it seems like her power is carrying over very well into the MMA world. For Reneau, she's a BJJ brown belt, my apologies. 3 wins by knockout, 2 submissions, and 1 decision victory overall. In her last fight, she caught Jessica Andrade with a beautifully executed triangle. After she actually got knocked down in a quick striking exchange, Andrade kind of sat in the position and allowed Reneau to lock it up, adjust, relock it up, and eventually finish it. And Reneau landed some nice elbows to kind of finish that deal there. Marion chambers her punches very well. She's a decent movement, mixes in her kicks, and she's a very effective striker. For Holm, what she does is she throws her punches, despite being a boxer, she throws her punches as a kind of a distraction, as kind of a setup for her kicking arsenal, which is very strong. She actually was also a kickboxer in her previous life as well. She works from range exceptionally well. In her last fight, she wasn't landing with a lot of power with her hands, but again, she was setting up those kicks, and her big kick is her left high kick, which she'll look to land for the knockout. She likes to use a side kick or a push kick to the front that kind of creates distance, and overall, her opponents have a lot of trouble closing the gap, which is something she does very well. But the one knock on Holm, which nearly cost her debut fight, is she tends to backtrack in her footwork and movement to be evasive, and it gives her opponents the appearance of being aggressive. It's almost like a Lyoto Machida, what he had issues with earlier in his career, and that can cost her if his opponents are coming forward Diego Sanchez style, just throwing and maybe not hitting, but they're at least being aggressive. Interesting fact as well, Holm, 0 first-round knockouts, despite having 6 of her 8 fights ending via stoppage. 4 have come in the second round, 1 in the third round, and 1 in the fifth round, so it shows she carries her power very well later into fights. I would think Reneau could look for a takedown. Holmes has very strong takedown defense, solid balance, though I think she should have, be able to defend them. The aggression and forward pressure of Reneau could be the key to her success on the feet, keep Holm backing up. Pennington did have some success when she was able to close that gap and land, but again, it was difficult closing that gap overall. I think Holm will be much more comfortable in her second UFC appearance. Look for her to counter Reneau's aggression, keep her out of range, set up a head kick, and I think she gets that knockout, my prediction, and look for that left high kick. Holly Holm to defeat Marion Reneau by knockout. Fight number 4 in the main card. This is an exceptionally awesome card when you look at it. It takes place in the lightweight division. The number 10th ranked lightweight Josh the Punk Thompson, 20 wins, 7 losses, and 1 no contest, takes in number 12 Tony El Kukui Ferguson with a current record of 19 wins and 3 defeats. Now this is certainly a battle of old versus young line. We actually have 2 of these taking place in this fight and the next. Thompson's trying to hold on to his spot in the upper echelon of the lightweight division, and Ferguson's trying to take his place and surpass him and build off of his name. Thompson comes in with just 2 wins in his last 6 appearances. But keep in mind, of those 4 losses, 3 of them came by split decision, and very contestable ones at that. Ferguson, on the other hand, has won 5 in a row, and in the 9 UFC fights, he has 8-1, so he has had a significant run. He's also an Ultimate Fighter winner, so he's being very successful and looking to continue that with the biggest name of his potential career. Thompson comes into this matchup out for almost a year after the Bobby Green fight. He was talking about retiring. We've heard him talk about that a couple other times. This could be his last fight. It might not be. Either way, it's a big fight for him. He is 36 years of age, 6 years older than Ferguson. Physically, Tony will be 1 inch taller and will have a marked 5-inch reach advantage. Now, Thompson, NCAA Division III wrestler. He's a black belt in Guerrilla Jiu-Jitsu. 9 wins by submission, which seems to be his strongest attribute. He is 5-1 in fights ending by knockout. Overall, though, 6-6 in decisions. He's had some hard luck with the judges, and again, that tells you a little bit about his skill set. It's just not the strongest for pulling away from opponents and differentiating himself from his opposition, saying I'm the better fighter in this matchup. For Ferguson, he also comes from a collegiate wrestling background. He's a BJJ brown belt. He has 9 wins by knockout. He's also 6-1 in fights ended by submission, and he's 3-2 in decision. So not quite as bad as Thompson's record would suggest, but still a couple issues there. Both guys have shown major flaws of late that the other could capitalize on. It makes this fight difficult to predict. Thompson tends to let his offensive output wane at times. He wasn't pulling the trigger against Bobby Green, not active enough. There were opportunities for him to attack or even grapple, and he just didn't jump on them when he should have. Now, for Ferguson, he was taking some massive chances against Danny Castillo, giving up position, getting put on his back, and getting stuck on that position, and that nearly cost him a fight that he was pretty dominant in when he wasn't making an ass of himself. Let's say that by trying stupid leg locks. I was getting frustrated because it was a big fight for me. Now, Thompson, he has a solid striking skill set. Has a little bit of you can see a little bit of a karate kicking game in it, but he's far more effective when he can get his grappling involved. If he can take Ferguson down with regularity, he will smother him on the mat. He will grind out a decision win as far as I'm concerned. But Ferguson has excellent takedown defense, 80%. He will attack off his back if he gets put there. Castillo did keep him pinned there, so again, I'm very concerned if Ferguson can't defend the initial takedown attempt. Ferguson, though, he works at a very high pace. We saw that in his last 2 matchups, where especially against Abel Trujillo, he was able to really wear him out with his pace. He averages 3.55 strikes landed per minute, gives up 2.60, so a pretty solid striking exchange rate. And compared to Thompson, he's a much more natural power striker. I think Thompson's going to try and deal with the reach using his kicks. We saw him TKO Nate Diaz with a head kick, but I think overall he's going to get dragged away from his grappling into a striking-based fight that does not bode well for him. I think Ferguson simply outworks him on the feet, stays busier, might hurt him with a shot or two, but my prediction is Tony Ferguson to defeat Josh Thompson by decision. In the co-main event of the evening, we're in the UFC's lightweight division. Again, is the number 5 ranked Gilbert El Nino Melendez, former UFC Strikeforce champion, 22-5-0, takes on an Ultimate Fighter finalist, the number 13th ranked Raging Al Iaquinta, with a current record of 12 wins, 3 losses, and a single draw. Now, Melendez is filling in on short notice for Bobby Green. He's got about 1 month's notice to prepare for this fight. He took this matchup on only a couple days after losing a split decision to Eddie Alvarez at UFC 188. He certainly wanted to get back in there. For Iaquinta, he's coming up a split decision over a guy we've already talked about on the show, Jorge Masvidal. It was contestable. He was hurt early in that fight, almost stopped in the first round. He rallied, was busier in rounds 2 and 3, and ultimately got the decision. For Gilbert, kind of a similar scenario against Eddie Alvarez. He hurt Alvarez in the first round, couldn't finish him, and then lost rounds 2 and 3 mainly on his lack of defensive wrestling as Eddie rallied and got the job done. Now, Melendez comes into this fight in a must-win situation. He is 1-3 in the UFC. His only victory so far over Diego Sanchez. He's fought for the titles twice, and is slipping down the ranks further and further with every loss. Physically, he will be 3 inches... he has a 3-inch reach advantage. They are the same height, and Al is 5 years younger. Now, Iaquinta comes in with 6 wins by knockout, 5 wins by decision. He's a concerning 1-3 in fights ended by submission. Not something Gil has shown that he can take advantage of with just a single submission win in his career. Gil does have significant power, though. 11 wins by knockout, a solid chin, though, never been knocked out, and he's 10-4 when fights go the distance. Now, Melendez, in his last 5 losses, it shows how important that his wrestling is. He has lost the takedown battle 16-5, so it shows that if he can't get his wrestling involved, he's not the same fighter. Against Eddie Alvarez, he was taken down 3 times, didn't land a single takedown, and that certainly hurt him. He needs to be able to use his wrestling to be a complete fighter, to be an effective fighter. We could see some action on the ground here. Most likely Gilbert will be the one to try and initiate it, but Iaquinta has an 84% takedown defense. He's only been taken down more than once. One time in the UFC, which was 2 years ago and 7 fights ago. He's tightened up his defense. He's very difficult to put on the mat, and I think we'll see that here as well. For Iaquinta, where he's having success, he has vastly improved his striking. He's exceptionally technical, very good boxing, high volume combinations, mixes in his kicks very well. He doesn't have significant one-punch power, even though he can crack guys and hurt them. Against like Joe Lozon, we saw he overwhelms them with just smack, 3/4 power punches, and really, eventually they just succumb. They can't take anymore. 4.91 strikes landed per minute gives them almost not quite 1.5 strikes more output for him over Gil. Al does get hit a lot, though, 3.72 strikes per minute, so his defense needs to be tightened up a little bit, but his footwork is improving, and he tends to be a little stationary at times, but his footwork is certainly getting better. For Gil, what he does very well, he has a nice left jab. He will rip punches to the body. He does a nice job of keeping pressure on. We saw him try and do that against Anthony Pettis, and he will open up and brawl, and that could be his key to success here. That could also be his downfall here, as he tends to get a little bit wide with his power strikes and becomes very counterable and very hittable. And I think Al's shorter, crisper strikes will give Gil trouble, especially when he winds up and looks to really unload with those power strikes around the outside. Gil needs to be hyper-aggressive instead of trying to sit and trade. Again, I think he has defensive lapses. Again, he's very hittable. He was rocked by Diego Sanchez. I think Al's speed, footwork, and pace are going to simply be too much for Gilbert. And his chin is concerned. I don't like the way he faded. Again, it could have been the altitude in Mexico, but I don't like the way he faded. I don't think the quick turnaround for a guy like him is a good idea. I think Gil could crack Al and hurt him, but my prediction is Al Iaquinta to simply outwork Gilbert Melendez and pick up the victory by decision. In the co-main event of the evening, the number 10th ranked Frank Mir, former UFC heavyweight champion, 17-9, battles 9-2 and unranked Todd Duffee. Now, what we have here in Frank Mir is a former UFC champion. He's at the end of his career. Again, heavyweight allows fighters to hang on a lot longer than other divisions. He's had a slight revitalization because he knocked out Bigfoot Silva, who has his own issues and could be facing retirement in the not-too-distant future as well. For Duffee, he is a prospect, in quotations, air quotes that you can't see. He's a heavyweight. He's only 29, which is pretty young for a heavyweight fighter as far as fighting at this level. He represents new blood in the division. As I said, he's unranked. He represents new blood if he can get into the upper echelon, and certainly could make some noise with what he's capable of. But he needs to remain active, and that's probably the reason he's not ranked. He's had long layoffs. Some health issues have cost him some time. Almost 2 years between his last 2 fights. Coming into this matchup, only a 7-month layoff, so certainly a little bit shorter than what we are used to seeing him. Physically, the guy's the same height, 6'3", same reach, 79 inches. Weight-wise, they'll weigh in somewhere in the mid-250s to low 260s. Duffee is 6 years younger, and he's a physical specimen. Frank Mir did bulk up for a bit there. We've seen him come back down and try and implement a little bit more of a speed game. And here's the 2 things that we're looking at here. Mir's submission game. He's a BJJ black belt, 9 wins by submission. He's incredibly nasty on the mat, and he can work from guard, and that's where he probably wants this fight to take place. For Duffee, it's his knockout power. 9 wins by knockout. All 3 of his UFC wins have come by KO. Tim Hague taking him out in 7 seconds, 33 seconds against Anthony Hamilton in his last matchup, and a marathon affair against Phil DeFries that lasted 2 minutes and 4 seconds. Now, Duffee has been knocked out twice, once in incredibly embarrassing fashion against Mike Russell in a fight he dominated pillar to post before getting clipped and put down with that hammer fist of doom. Go back and check it out, it's ridiculous. He also was stopped outside of the UFC by Alistair Overeem. Again, at heavyweight, anyone can knock out anyone if you hit him on the button, and that probably was the case there. I think Overeem stopped him with knees to the body, to tell you the truth. Now, for Frank Mir, he does have 4 wins by knockout, taking out Bigfoot Silva, Big Nog, Mirko Krokop, and Wes Sam, with the last 3 guys kind of being older guys at the end of their careers, and certainly became a little more vulnerable to being knocked out. Mir's striking has improved, but it's not to be blown out of proportion. He talked about how he could knock out anybody heavyweight with that combination, and maybe that's the truth, but I just don't see him knocking out the upper echelon. Now, the big thing here is Frank Mir, 7 of his 9 losses have come by knockout. His chin is infamous for being glass. When he gets cracked, he's in serious trouble. He was hurt several times by Overeem, but survived. Junior Santos punched right through his guard and hurt him, and that's something that when you're fighting at heavyweight, when your chin goes, it's a pretty steep drop to the bottom. If Mir, though, can get Duffee on the mat, he has the ability to submit him. We've seen Duffee briefly put on his back by DeFries. He did spring back up, but again, if Frank Mir can put him down, that's his best bet to winning this matchup. Now, in that fight against DeFries, Duffee closed the distance, fought very close range, showed himself to be very strong, bullying him around, and we've seen Mir struggle in situations like that before, against Shane Carwin, against Overeem, against Daniel Cormier. He didn't have a lot to offer, and Duffee landed some short, fight-ending shots in that range. Now, Duffee, though, he needs to be very careful, especially if he knocks Mir down and just willy-nilly jumping into his guard, Fedor Emelianenko, Fabricio Verdum style, because Frank Mir is very capable of submitting you, even in a dazed state. We saw that in the Big Nog rematch, and Duffee needs to be very cognizant of that scenario. Now, going back to the DeFries fight, when he has someone hurt, he's incredibly relentless. That's the word I'm looking for. When he puts guys down against DeFries, he opened up with a barrage of brutally powerful right hands. I'm trying to say it. I'm excited about this matchup. You can tell. It's eventually put DeFries down. His striking repertoire is not overly complex. A left jab, straight right combination is his favorite 1-2 combination. He moves very well for a big man. Good footwork, very fast, and that can really throw some guys off. But again, if Mir can drag this fight into deep waters, he could have success. 9 of Duffee's 11 fights have ended in the first round. We saw him slow down a little bit against Mike Russo, but he was still throwing hard leather prior to that devastating knockout. Now, Mir doesn't have a great takedown game, and for my money, he's not going to be able to take Duffee down unless Duffee makes a mistake and miscalculates. Mir can't afford to stand and trade with him, but I think he's going to have to. I think he's going to struggle to get this fight to the mat. He's going to stand and trade, and he's going to get caught. Duffee's speed and power simply overwhelms Frank Mir, potentially at range, potentially in the cage. If he makes contact with him, it's over. And my prediction is Todd Duffee to defeat Frank Mir by knockout. So those are my 9 main card predictions. 3 for the Ultimate Fighter 21 finale. 6 for the Wednesday night's UFC Fight Night 71. My bet packs, I'll post them as soon as possible. Head over to kamikazeoverdrive.net to check out all of my preliminary predictions for this card. I'll do my best to cover every single fight. Again, I might cut out a couple of the cast members if they're squared off. I might not even get the Ultimate Fighter finale matchup posted. I'll see what I can do as far as time frame is concerned. I've got a lot going on. And, thanks as always, guys, for tuning in. Buy the bet packs. Check out my site. And I will see you back here in the not-too-distant future.